for joining in. We have Tim Hawks as our speaker today, and I had an opportunity to attend his webinar in one of the WebEx sessions in 2016, and I was very impressed. So I thought, why not bring Tim, if possible, to share his experience and learnings over a period of time. And he expertise in making coaching culture work in organizations. So I specifically requested Tim to share some of his case study as well, during the presentation that hopefully he will talk about. I also shared a link that Tim shared that you should go through the profiling, and I hope all of you have done that. That's going to be useful through the sessions. So welcome, Tim. And thanks for joining in. I reached out to Tim and he was very supporting, and he quickly adjusted his timeline to support this time frame for the webinar. So thank you, Tim, for that, and welcome among the group. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nitin, and welcome all of you to this webinar. I'm quite excited to deliver this, mainly because coaching cultures is an exciting subject for me. It fascinates me, and I'm going to talk you through a little bit about the journey I've been on to get here, a little bit about my thinking and where I'm at in terms of global coaching cultures and how they work. But also, I want to talk to you about this tool which we operate called Embark, the only coaching culture assessment tool available to any organization anywhere in the world. So my bold statement to you is at the end of this session, not only will you be able to clearly understand coaching cultures in organizations, you'll be able to break it down into 9 key dimensions. And what the great thing about that is it gives you a language that if, say, you're going into clients as a coach, or you are an internal coach or somebody responsible for internal coaching, means that it will give you a language around which to talk about coaching cultures. Because as you'll notice when I go through this presentation, there are a number of failures of businesses when they start their coaching culture journey. That means they never actually get to the end. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. The key message is don't over-train your people in coaching. That's the overall really message to organisations. Not entirely sure how long it's going to last. I've got a number of slides and I'll work my way through them. If there are questions, obviously feel free to interrupt if you can. I'm not sure about the technology, or if necessary, Nitin can take a hand up or a question in the chat, and if he wants to interrupt me, feel free. I work much better when I'm interrupted because I know you're all still alive. Otherwise, I'm just talking well, I can see Nitin, which is great, and he's smiling. That's important. Otherwise, when I did the WBEX one, I had about 160 delegates, and then it dropped to 120 at one point, and I nearly had a heart failure, and then it went back up again, and there must have been a technical hitch, but it didn't do anything for myself. My self-anxiety. So stick with it. If you've got any questions, it always helps to ask at the time, and then you've got some relevance. If not, please feel free to hold on to it till the end.
So what we'll do, Tim, is that we will probably break it 30 minutes or whichever is the logical break, and you can request for the questions, and if there are questions, we will open up and let people ask questions. And then we can probably do it once in the end of the session as well.
That's a really good idea, actually, and there's a natural place to do that. So we'll work our way through that. Let me just grab my slides off the printer. Okay, so what I want to do first of all is just take you a little bit through my journey into developing a coaching culture. So I started my business, Unlimited Potential, 14 years ago. And at that time, we were delivering just one-to-one coaching. It wasn't me, it was actually my dad. Who was doing the coaching. He's no longer with us, and so I had to go elsewhere to find the coaching support. We operate a associate coaching model. I've got 90 now coaches across the world who deliver mainly one-to-one coaching and delivery work. But about 10 years ago, I made the realization that we were delivering these hundreds of hours of coaching, but not making much of a difference at the organizational level. And so I asked myself the question, what is it that an organization needs to do when it looks at its coaching culture to understand how individual one-to-one coaching can lead to a bigger story. And actually, it turned into a almost lifelong, complex, difficult understanding of how coaching cultures and organizations work. And when you boil it down, a coaching culture in an organization, where the rubber hits the road, is all about our conversations. It's all about how we have our conversations, what we say, how we listen, and how we are seen to be listened, or how we seem to be listening, and how we respond to that. So I'm going to cover all of that as we go through. So to start off with, my organizational vision, if you like, it revolves around the why now concept. It's written the letter Y because of Generation Y, and it talks a little bit about technology and how it's affected leadership in organizations today. The world in which we work is now moving faster than our human ability to keep up. As a result, what we're seeing in organizations is a significant reduction in people's resilience and capacity to cope. And this results then in this I'm busy complex. So everyone has to say they're busy, otherwise they get given more work. So they make themselves busy, and then they create busy fools. And then when more work comes in, they're unable to cope with it because they think they haven't got any bandwidth. And then they start falling apart. And then in a culture now where stress and anxiety is a lot more open, people are open talking about it, it's resulted in people really struggling to cope. So in my view, coaching cultures are an absolute solution to developing resilience and capacity in today's changing world. There's also a piece in here about meeting the generational gap. We've got, obviously, as leaders go through organizations, the leaders are generally the older people in the organization, and you've got the young people who are being led. And at the moment, we've got the digital generation being led by the non-digital generation. And we describe this as a bit like being cats and dogs leadership. So you've got dogs. If you think of dogs, they hunt in packs, they do what they're told, they bark when they want something, they eat when they're hungry, and they're fairly easy to organise. So you've got them managing cats. Now you can put the food out, will the cat come? I don't know, it might be living next door. It might never come home, who knows? And managing cats with a dog mentality is very, very difficult. And so part of this coaching culture initiative is all around how do we manage that generational leadership gap, and what is it a coaching culture can bring to our organisation to make leadership more effective. I think another piece in today's world is about authenticity. I think it's a key subject that's been lost in our world. People are saying what they think they should be saying rather than doing what they should be doing. And this is the result of systems and processes becoming so overwhelming that people in organisations no longer know who they are. Combine that with the resilience and capacity piece, and you've got some people who find themselves relatively lost, not knowing how to lead. And that's where us as coaches, or us as organisations with a view to wanting a coaching culture come in, is to help people find their authenticity. And then finally, in my list of things as to why my organisation exists now is around the coaching culture, which is what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, more about in a bit. One of the things I do, and I have done for a number of years now, is I present this picture to my delegates in presentations. Now, Nitin will have probably seen this in one of my 2 WBEX presentations. Now, this is just a picture, of course. However, what I do is I put to the audience, and I won't do it to you now, but I want you to form your own opinion. The question is this picture a sad reflection of today's society? Or is this picture an exciting vision of communication for the future? And often what I find is you'll get a half and half split in the audience as to those that think this is a sad reflection of today's society, standing there with a view that these 4, what I think are boys, are all not talking to each other, and therefore that is a failure. Or actually, is it an exciting piece of communication collaboration? Because I'm told by the experts or the youngsters that know that these 4 are actually playing a game together. Not that I would know, but they can tell from the consoles that this is apparently a game they're playing together. And so as a result, they're actually communicating on a very different level, and this is exciting. Now, what's interesting is it doesn't matter which view you hold, and I don't mind which view you hold, both are equally valid. However, what is interesting is the split normally falls half and half. And what that means is we've got a dichotomy in our leadership, in that we've got one group of people thinking we must talk to solve the problem, and we've got another group of people thinking, oh, we'll just get on the computer, or we'll do it through social media or other means. And this creates a large conflict around how we manage and the whole generational wide gap. Now, moving on about that, how do we get these leaders or these people who are being led to change their way of thinking? And a lot of the work I've been doing recently, and this is all new stuff, certainly Tim won't have seen this in the WBEX presentation, so this is sort of hot off the press, is my business is moving into the direction of getting people out of their comfort zone. We only learn when we step outside of the comfort zone. It's a lovely place, but nothing grows there. And so we've spent the last 6 months looking at, well, what does that actually mean? You know, how does stepping out of our comfort zone mean? And I've even gone so far as to instructing my people to get to a point where we can measure people as they move out of their comfort zone during a coaching intervention. And we do that as follows. So I want you to imagine the comfort zone. Hopefully you're all sitting right now in wherever you are. I guess it's evening for you, so a lot of you at home, in your comfort zone. It's a place where you've created, that is in which you are comfortable and is in which you have some control over. And in for many situations, it's a good thing. It's good for us to rest there. It's good for us to stay relaxed there. However, it can be a place where denial thrives. It can be slow-paced, and it can be unchallenging. The other thing, of course, is that from my point of view, if you are a dog-style leader in a Generation Y world, staying in your comfort zone doesn't work. You do need to step out. Now, the risk of stepping out of your comfort zone is, of course, you have to go through the discomfort phase, which is different for all of us, but it's generally painful. People sometimes react badly. In my experience in coaching, we have crying. I had a chief executive that tried to storm out on me the other day. Luckily, I'd done some pre-contracting with them. As they got halfway across the room, I said, before you go, you have a choice. I said, you're in the non-comfort zone. We discussed that at the beginning. You have a choice of leaving, and I will go too, or you can sit back down and we can get through your discomfort zone and go to the place where the magic happens. Now, fortunately, in that case, it was bold, I agree, but in that case, this chief executive sat back down and we were able to carry on because we'd given them some language around what this discomfort zone means. This is the place where we lash out. This is the place where we give excuses. We create stories for ourselves about why we shouldn't do things, and we feel a bit vulnerable, which for many people isn't a good place to be. And feeling vulnerable is a really interesting place for some leaders. They don't believe that a place they should be. I absolutely think it is a place you should be. And I wallow in being vulnerable at times when I can, because I'm quite happy when I don't know things and I'm not clear about it. But the great news is, guys, when we get out of the discomfort zone, we move into some really exciting places. We can start to develop our knowledge, improve our resilience and capacity, which I talked about earlier, start seeing the problem from a different point of view, and then start becoming self-aware about us, but also aware about others. But it doesn't stop there, we don't think. We think there's more. We think that if we keep pushing through our comfort zone, we get into the doing phase where stuff starts happening. My most interesting one on here is ego loses at this point. So if you find yourself fighting an ego in your comfort zone, you will lose. But if you're in your doing zone, the ego will start to back off. It will take time. It doesn't happen immediately, but the ego will lose its energy in the doing zone. You'll be able to overcome uncertainty and start delivering objectives much more easily. And then finally, we believe we have this being zone. This is the sort of furthest point from the comfort zone, if you like, where we start the whole self-actualization, the self-awareness, the light bulb moments, the place, essentially what we say is where the magic happens. Now, you may be looking at this and going, oh, God, brilliant. Well, let's get into the being zone. And we can go, we're not going to live in the being zone all the time. Otherwise, we're going to burn out. We have to go back to the comfort zone to relax. We have to come down and then we have to punch through it again. But each time we go through the discomfort zone, our comfort zone gets bigger. And the bigger it gets, the more we're capable of doing. We become more resilient, etc., etc. And so when we talk about a coaching culture, as we come on to the bigger picture about a coaching culture later on, for me, this is about individuals. I talked to you, when the rubber hits the road in a coaching culture is when our conversation, how we converse. And if we are conversing in an environment where we push people through the discomfort zone without judging them and without bullying them and without prejudice, then we start delivering some amazing coaching cultural results. So when I go through this later on and talk through about moving into the coaching culture and the being phase, this is the place where we know what we're doing, we understand what coaching is, we understand how to listen, and we understand how to communicate. It's all about where the rubber hits the road. Now, just to finish this little thing off, which we've created, what we're starting to do now, we're in the very early stages of it now, is at the end of a coaching session, we ask people how far down the scale they've got in their comfort zoneometer, if you like. I haven't come up with a name with it yet, but how far on this scale they're going to get. You know, if during this coaching session, did you go through the discomfort zone to 6? Were you at 8? Were you at 9? Now, I don't as yet know whether this is going to work as a tool, but what I do know is it will start telling me whether my coaches are delivering high quality coaching interventions, because really they should be pushing that discomfort zone on every session. Maybe not too hard or too far on some. Sometimes you don't get there. Sometimes you just go slightly into it. Sometimes you go way beyond it and you can be really excited. But what we want to do is test the coachee to find out where they've gone through their discomfort zone, because that, I believe, is where coaching cultures really happen, when people are pushed out and beyond. So let's move away from essentially the one-to-one conversation. That was just a bit of background about my thinking and about how I operate with organizations when it comes to coaching. So where are coaching cultures born? Well, from my point of view, there are 3 areas where they come from. You get the director-led coaching culture, normally coming from the chief executive or possibly from members of the board. They're relatively rare. When they do happen, it generally comes from a chief executive who says, I want a coaching culture, and has no idea what it means or what they're doing. But for some reason, they read about it once or heard their mate had done it with their other business and decide they want to. Which leaves the HR and L&D team in a complex situation that they've got to try and fathom out what the director actually wants, what it means, and of course there's no budget for it, etc., etc. If it is director-led, of course, that's good news, because that allows you, it does mean you've got quite a lot of strength in terms of moving it forward. I'm just going to shut my curtain, as I can see the sun is starting to make me look a bit darker. Hang on. I told you spring was coming in England. It's the sun's out. People are happy today. It's great. Okay. So the second one in where coaching cultures are born is where it comes from the HR team. So led either by the HR lead, the L&D lead, or a member of the human resources team. This is much more common in terms of how they're driven. The problem is that we have to drive the story upwards to the directors to convince them this is a good idea. Because if we go in at HR level with a coaching culture program, you will never deliver a coaching culture. And what ends up happening is they get cycled in loops of delivering coaching training and nothing more. And what we want is if we were to come in on an HR-led coaching culture, we would drive up first. So we would say something along the lines of, well, we need to meet some directors and find out what they think about this, because if they're not bought in, then we can do the work, but you're not going to get a coaching culture. You might get it in small teams, you won't get it across the organization. And then there's individual-led, guerrilla-style coaching cultures. You've got a manager in a warehouse, maybe a sales team leader who decide this is the way forward, make it great for their team, and then it embryonically grows out in the organization slowly. Often, if you're an independent coach, you might find yourself involved with one of these, a team that's got a budget, wants to do it, you go in and intervene. But it can be really difficult to prise open and get further up the organization with your coaching culture initiative. With the tools and techniques I can show you in this presentation, you will be able to do that a lot more easily. Okay, so let's get on to one of my favorite subjects of what actually is a coaching culture. And I do workshops with organisations about what is a coaching culture. I did an ICF workshop in Istanbul with what is a coaching culture. It had David Clutterbuck in the room, who's a well-respected professor in the coaching world. I've never been so daunted in my life to see him sitting in the back of a workshop that I was delivering. Actually, it was very fruitful and turned out really well. But I have a whole numbers, about 50 sheets here of coaching culture definitions that people have come up with over the years. And they range from things like, a culture of collaborative, constant self-improvement where leaders are always learning how to be better, to coaching culture is about developing a culture of sustainable change and possibility. Now, a lot of these are okay. Some of them don't excite me. What I'd like to do is, over like 10 years of doing this, is share with you 4 of the best, so that you can take that away and I've done all the hard work for you. But just to give you some idea of where I personally think coaching cultures are coming from. So here's version 1. A coaching culture is a place where authentic leaders have amazing conversations that generate improved results. The fairly basic definition of a coaching culture, but it does cover the key elements of it: the leadership, the great conversations, which I talked about earlier, but also results. And measuring and generating results out of coaching culture is really hard work, and something we're still working on. It's the same with trying to measure and assess at a qualitative level and a quantitative level individual coaching programs. It's even harder to do it with a coaching culture program, which is why this Embark tool was the start of my journey to do that. Don't worry, the definitions do get better, but this was the first place where I started. The next one, a coaching culture is a place where listening is the key to greater performance. What I really like about this is it includes performance, which is results, but it also talks about, when I said when the rubber hits the road in a coaching culture, it's about the conversation. Well, you can't have a conversation without listening. So what it does is it focuses on the listener in the conversation piece. It says that in this culture, listening is the most important part of the communication. And actually, if you break it down, I absolutely agree with that. Listening is the key part of what a good conversation should be. So this could be a good definition for your organisation of coaching culture. The next one came from an organisation I worked with. It was a small company, small team working together, and just came up with what I believe to be just a stroke of genius. A coaching culture is a place where we understand that the support for the solution is embedded in those around us. What that means is that we know that somewhere in our organisation the solution exists, and it creates an environment of what I call humble and curious. Humble and curious is a great place for a coaching culture to thrive, because if we're humble and curious, we ask questions. If we ask questions, then we're going to listen. If we listen and answer properly, then actually we've created a coaching culture by understanding the support is embedded elsewhere. Really powerful definition of a coaching culture as far as I'm concerned. And then finally, my, if you like, ultimate test myself to the ends of the earth. Can I define a coaching culture in 3 words? After much brain racking, yes, I can. A coaching culture is essentially a hierarchy of equals. So a bit of definition around that. What does that mean? Well, what it means is we live in an organisation that has a very clear hierarchy that we understand, but within it, we're all equal human beings, and we must treat each other as such. And so we respect that Sally up here is higher than I am down here. However, if we are human beings, if she asks me to do something, I respect that that is in the best interest of the business. And I also don't disrespect, I know it's in the best interest of the business, so therefore I will do it. And because we're human beings, I will do it at the best of my ability because I know that it's worth doing. But if I'm told by her that it's something that actually I don't think is worth doing, and I don't have a justified reason for doing it, then I'm not going to do it, and the culture starts falling apart. So the coaching culture is the fact that we treat each other with equality, without prejudice, but we are aware the hierarchy has value, but not on a power spectrum, but on a functional process and efficiency spectrum. So from my point of view, when I go around to talk to organisations, I define a coaching culture as being a hierarchy of equals. So we've got a couple more slides, and then we'll come to a stop. So those people with any burning questions. But I just want to talk through some of the interesting mistakes that organisations make when embarking on their coaching culture journey. The classic mistake over and over again, and I find myself going into organizations and you say, what have you done so far? And they say, oh, well, we've done some 2-day coach training program for 200 of our managers. And at which point I go, you must stop. You really must stop. You know, coach training is good and it must be done, but don't sheep dip your whole management population through a 2-day coaching program, because it won't work. You know, they'll go in, they'll have a great experience. Hopefully the training is of good quality, and they'll come back into organization that hasn't changed. They will go back to the way they were, and the coaching culture will never ever take off. So coach training must be done in association with other stuff. It can't sit alone in isolation, and it can't just be, we'll do more, we'll do more, we'll do more. So I always say to organizations, whatever you're doing, stop the coach training now until we can understand the organization, what its needs are, what it requires, and then we'll intervene with some specialized coach training that's going to work. This is a classic. So you'll always go into an organization, you'll find the senior team have their own coaches. Sometimes they meet in their private clubs, or they meet at pubs or whatever, cafes, wherever they might go. But nobody knows what's going on in that coaching intervention. Now, if you're the HR lead, you need to know what's going on in that coaching intervention in order for you to tailor that to fit in with the rest of the organization. So we need to be measuring what's going on at senior executive level. In my 14 years of doing this, I've never achieved that, but it's a nice option to think about. But if we don't measure these senior executive coaching programs, then we can't align them with the bigger coaching culture piece. And so they stand alone, and they're essentially only good for the individual and not good for the coaching culture initiative. Much easier to start the coaching culture initiative and then bring the coaching at senior level in afterwards. And the coaches have been briefed about what you want to achieve so that they can then, if you like, bring the coaching round to ensure that it's in line with the organizational program. If we're coach training at all, we need to follow up on it for the same reason I explained before. If we do coach training, they go back to their organization or into their team, nothing's changed. They go back to the way they were. If we don't follow it up, what's happened? Nothing. Coaching culture dies. And then finally, this is the classic, in all the questions that I have, a misunderstanding of what coaching is. We worked with one international pharmaceutical agency once whose chief executive thought coaching was the hour's conversation you had after a sales meeting. And no end of discussion with him was going to make him think anything different. And so that's what coaching became for that organization. And we brought in what we call powerful conversations as an initiative to bring coaching in around the other way. But a lot of people don't know what coaching is. The coaching mentoring continuum gets confused. And often in organizations, we don't know what it is. And later on, I'll show you in raw case study terms exactly what this means and the impact it has on an organization. And then additionally, we have here the three reasons for failure of an organization or organizational coaching culture is going wrong. The first one is we expect immediate results. So if we go back to a director-led coaching culture initiative, as I said, one that starts by the directors, if you go, right, yeah, we'll do this, this, and this, we'll put in this coach training program, we'll get results in 3 months' time, you won't. Depending on the size of the organization, less than 400, you might do it in 2 years. Anything more than that, you're looking at a 4 to 6 year strategy. Don't, whatever you do, promise immediate results. Promise results in a year's time or 18 months' time. If the low-hanging fruit is very small and very unedible when it comes to developing coaching cultures. So the other thing that stops a coaching culture from going wrong is the internal coaching, is long-term senior support. So you might start off with a couple of directors who are really keen, one will leave, politics will stop them from being interested, the organisation will suddenly have a drama and they'll stop being interested. And if that drifts away, the coaching culture, bringing it in, gets harder and harder and harder. So you must always be fighting for ambassadors for coaching at senior level throughout the process. And then the final one, the one that Ernst & Young felt foul of when they tried to implement coaching culture, is bringing coaching into your internal processes. There isn't a single person on the board or in your process team or in the regulatory team who will want to bring coaching into your processes. So if you're in the L&D or HR team, you're going to need to push this really hard. But if you don't bring it into your processes, so how do we have our conversations? When we do our PDRs, our monthly reviews, when we sit down one-to-ones, how are we having our conversations? That should all be processed in a coaching manner. If it isn't, then we lose momentum. And I've seen a number of coaching cultures fall over at this point when we try and bring it actually wholesale into the organisation. So this might be a good time, help us to see if there are any questions, Nitin, and then get any feedback from some guys before. What we'll do next is we'll actually move into the coaching culture model that we've developed and how that works based on all the stuff that I've told you before.
Okay, thanks, Yatin. So far, I have one question, and I'll open up for other as well. Yatin has asked on your slide where you were mentioning comfort zone to discomfort zone to knowing, doing, and being.
Yeah.
He's asking, as the person evolves through the expanding circles of knowing, doing, being, the comfort zone circle too will expand in size. Does it ever happen in higher evolution stage that the comfort zone circle expands to completely map the being circle?
Oh, do you know what? I don't know the answer to that question. It's a brilliant question. I'm going to have, I don't know the answer to that question because we're not far enough down the road on this model. What I will say though, is that I'm going to go on my own experience here because I have a good understanding of my own discomfort zone, and you've just pushed me into it, which I love, is I think it's possible, but I don't know. There must always be a discomfort zone though, because we must always be able to push ourselves further. It's not finite, because if we reach a point where there's no discomfort zone, then we're in an unchallenged, relaxed environment. So there must always be a discomfort zone, but I think potentially it could be very, very small. So I think I would love to say yes, I really would. I don't know, and watch this space, but what a brilliant question. Email me later, I want to talk more about that. That's a great question.
Okay. Nitin, can I ask him a direct question?
MG, just give me a minute. One more question has come in here.
Okay.
How many organizations start from the top, where the most of the interventions starting?
So most initiatives start from our HR led. So it's unusual. What happens is if they start at the top, what's happened is the chief executive or a key lead, maybe the HR lead or the L&D lead, head of people, will have decided that a coaching culture is what they want. And then they'll say, we want a coaching culture, and that will be it. They may not have any idea of what it actually means. And so they leave people lower down with a real can of worms, because they go off to find out what a coaching culture is. They Google it, they're lost. And then it's a case of, well, what do we actually want to achieve here? And that's why when I sit down with organizations, the first thing I do when I go through with them is I say, what is a coaching culture to you? Because that's why we do the definition work, the hierarchy of equals and all that. Because if they don't know what they're doing, we're already wasting our time. So if it is director-led, it normally ends up sitting at the HR team with them trying to fathom it out. Now, if it's HR-led, the great news about that is they have a much better idea of what coaching is, but the problem we have now is influencing upwards. In my experience, most are HR-led. If they're not HR-led, it comes from a diktat from above that says, do this, and then it lands on the HR's door and they've got themselves a problem. But the majority are HR-led. And then every now and then you'll get a small team, depending on the size of the organization, a small team might be an entire country who decide they want to do it, which is the sort of guerrilla-led one that I mentioned before. But mostly the answer to that is HR-led.
So what I'm hearing, Tim Hawks, is also that when the coaching culture initiatives are from HR-led, they tend to be more successful. If they are director-led, they become more directive, and unless HR takes the initiative to first bring the director into the coaching culture, they, most of the time tend to be more authoritative than really becoming a coaching culture. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's the challenge that we face is one of the, in the early stages of the coaching culture, getting directors on board and getting them to understand the benefits of coaching is a key thing that, that's the key sort of first step. Because if they're not brought in, you lose them quickly. It's not politically exciting to be aligned to coaching.
Okay, thanks, Tim. MG, go ahead, please.
Tim, can you please go back to that slide which Yatin was referring to?
Which one was that? The
circle.
Discomfort zone.
Yeah.
Okay.
There it is.
Yeah, that's it. No, yeah, this is the one. Okay, here you've put the doing as a sequence after knowing, and I was just wondering whether sometimes doing comes between comfort and discomfort, and people just by sheer doing, they learn that they can get out of the discomfort, get into the discomfort zone. Not after realizing the knowing. That's what I was thinking. Is it sequential, or can it also happen in between?
I think that's a really good point. I think now anyone who does the doing to get them through the discomfort zone must have been there first to know how to do it. So I think there's an element of that being a learnt response in terms of going through the discomfort zone. I would also question that if you're pushing yourself through the discomfort zone with doing, it's a different type of doing to the one when you actually get to this the outer ring, if you like. It's much more of a functional doing rather than a realizational doing, a much more practical doing than it is a sensual, spiritual doing. I'm aware that's a slightly fluffy answer, but does it make sense?
Yeah, because sometimes when you, often people have starting problems, they don't do. And if you just nudge them to do it once, then they taste the comfort of the discomfort zone, It could happen. That was one point. Okay, thank you. I got the point. Second,
and I think just MG, just go back. I think this tool's new to us, relatively new to us. So these sorts of challenges fascinate me. I'm like, maybe there should be another ring in there. I don't know, but I know what you're saying. But I think that doing piece, if you're doing through the discomfort, that's just discomfort doing. It's not the doing that we're talking about, which is around much more spiritual, holistic, ontological doing of who we are.
Okay. Second quick question is, you're written becoming self-aware in the knowing as well as in the being, total self-awareness. So in knowing, when you say becoming self-aware, are you saying that starting to become self-aware?
Yes. So it starts in the knowing, ends in the being.
Okay, thank you.
Learning. One of the things we tried to do with this tool is that as you go through each ring, you work your way through that journey. So each one is a step on from the other. So becoming self-aware, or the self-awareness journey, is that whole thing from knowing to being is your self-awareness journey.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so those are the questions that you have had, Tim, so far. Let's just move ahead with your model.
Okay, great. So we'll just go through the slides again. So the knowing, doing, being is going to come back. You'll be pleased to know. So it's not. I'm sure you're all familiar with the knowing, doing, being model. It's something that's been around for a long time. It's not something we claim as ours, but it works really, really well for some of the models that we're doing. And so we stole it and put it into the comfort zone model from the Embark model that I'm going to talk you through here. So we have what we call three, when we consider organizational coaching cultures, we see them as 3 layers of coaching understanding. So I want you to imagine there's 1,000 people in an organization, and each one of those people will have a level of understanding of coaching, whether it be they know what it is, they're doing it, or it's part of who they are, their being, part of their everyday life. But interestingly enough, so will teams. Teams will also know what coaching is and doing it and being it, and so will the organization as a whole. So just to break down some of the definitions of knowing, and MG, this might help you going back in terms of the discomfort and comfort model as well. but we're applying it here in terms of coaching. So in this case, we know it exists, we understand what it is, and we're doing some reading up, training, and have a brief basic understanding of it. If we're doing it, we can actively demonstrate that coaching techniques are being used, they're being trained. Individuals, teams, and organizations are aware of and using coaching techniques. And then if we're being it, it's just a part of who we are. It's part of our natural conversations every day. We operate the hierarchy of equals. We listen. We use tools and techniques to help individuals, and it's self-sustaining. So when the manager comes and uses a coaching technique with person A likes that management style, so therefore they do it to their people as well, and it becomes a self-sustaining coaching culture. So important to understand there what the 3 levels of coaching maturity are, because we'll use them in the model in a minute. Now, the model also splits organizations up into 3 business levels. From our point of view, we see organizations in 3 different ways when it comes to coaching cultures, and each of these levels requires a different intervention, a different type of coaching culture operation, things like that. So I just want to introduce you to those levels now, because they'll come into the model in a minute, and you need to have an understanding of what they are. So as far as I'm concerned, workforce is those people without a management remit. Junior and middle managers is all managers, including senior managers, that have a responsibility for people, projects, or budgets. And then finally, and this is important, so just listening to this, the senior managers, for the context of this model, is the very senior team, the top 12, 7, 8 people, the management board, the com, the ex-com, what executive board, whatever you want to call them. So it's not senior managers or heads of, it's the very top, the presidents or vice presidents, people like that. So it's important to remember that as the model unfolds, because that does have a bearing on how it works. So we took those business levels, we took our coaching maturity levels, and we threw them all in the air, and they landed like this. So we have your coaching maturity levels going from left to right, knowing, doing, being, where you're better at coaching on the right-hand side than you are on the left. And we have the organization split to lower employees at the top, moving to more senior employees at the bottom. And that inevitably results or leads us to the wonderful 9 dimensions of a coaching culture. There they are. And what the 9 dimensions of a coaching culture do is they create a map, which we call the Embark map. And I'll come on to why we call it a map in a bit. Now, before I start unveiling the 9 dimensions to you, it's important to note that a coaching culture will only fully function when all 9 dimensions are addressed by the organization. If one dimension is not addressed, the coaching culture will fail. And as this unfolds, you'll hopefully, what normally happens with other audiences is people will start going, that's why that coaching culture doesn't work, or they're not looking at this arena, or they're not doing that, and that's why it isn't working. So organizations need to consider all 9 of these dimensions in order for their coaching culture to function. So let's start top left, workforce knowing. What do we need to do to help the workforce know what coaching is? Simply put, we develop and create resources. What this means is we provide, and it might not just be a book, it's not a bookcase. We're talking about online learning, we're talking about online resources, we're talking about having resources available if people want to find out more about coaching. We're talking about maybe lower level action learning groups, places where people who are non-managers can go to find out more about coaching. There's 2 reasons for this. One, obviously, it gives your workforce the opportunity to do their own development, gives them places to go. But 2, and more importantly, is the workforce can't say they weren't told or weren't given any support. Very important that for later on in your coaching culture initiative. So create an environment where resources are available to your workforce such that they can use them to find out more about coaching, and then obviously put initiatives in place for them to find it. Workforce doing. Now this specific dimension is a subject for one of the guys that works for me. He's written a book on this subject about workforce coachability. Is your organization ready for coaching? It's a fascinating subject. He goes as far as to say, if the coachee is ready, the coach will arrive, from the famous the teacher quote. But we do need to ask ourselves, and we do need to challenge, is our workforce ready to be coached? Is the culture of the organisation and the mentality of our people ready to receive a coaching style conversation? You know, there are sector organisations in the UK I've worked with, normally councils and local authorities and central government, where you'll go in and you'll say to somebody, they might say something like, I'm not happy about doing that. And you go, oh, really? Why not? And they'll turn around and don't give me any of that claptrap. Don't give me any of that soft and fluffy stuff. We're working here. That is not a workforce coachability environment. We need an environment where people go, how are you feeling today? And they go, do you know what? They don't just say, oh, fine. They'll say, actually, do you know what? I'm having a rubbish day. That's the sort of environment we need. So if we don't have this, we don't have a coaching culture. We can put as much work in at the senior managers as we can, but we need to find out whether our workforce is coachable or not. Now, the good news is in the 10 years I've been doing this, generally workforces are very coachable. They're very ready for coaching environment. They say so very clearly. They're just let down by their managers. And it does seem that in all the assessments we've done, that you get a workforce that's really ready to be coached, but as soon as they become managers, they never coach, they just become a manager. And they seem to forget in that transition that they were like the idea of being coached when they were in the workforce, but as soon as they step into junior middle managers, they suddenly become managers. And that's down to cultural learning. We learn from our managers, and then we do whatever they taught us. And it's somehow a sad reflection of what people think management is. So workforce coachability, really interesting subject. And then finally, how do we get our workforce to be in coaching? Well, that's where we go from being the coachee to becoming the coach. We realise the benefits of coaching. We see it coming from above, from our managers. It comes to us. We like it. Right, we're going to do it. And we're going to do it with our peers. We're going to coach upwards. We're going to do it with our family at home. And it's, we see the benefits. So we start this cycle of self-sustaining coaching culture. We go from coaching to coach. So moving on to junior middle managers. How do we get junior middle managers to know? Well, of course, we train them. And this is the dimension where we do provide coach training in a targeted and effective way. So there is room for coach training in developing a coaching culture, but it's only one of the 9 dimensions. Don't just stick to it, or that will be it. Okay. How do we get junior middle managers to do coaching? Well, this is around creating internal coach groups, sometimes known as coaching pools. We train up super coaches, we support them with supervision, and we provide them with a system and a process which is supported by the organisation to go out to the organisation and deliver internal coaching. Often we get failures here in coaching because you train up your super coach, they go back into their team, they go up to their team manager and say, I'm going over to procurement today to do a 2-hour coaching session. And the manager says, no, you're not. And that's it. Your coaching culture's failed at that moment when the manager says no, because by then they should already know the benefit of this, and they should say, fine, there should be a booking number for it if you book your time, so that when they do go, the manager's happy and they see the benefit and they know why it's happening. And then finally, in the middle row, junior middle managers, how do we get them to being? Well, that is when we actually deliver a functioning internal coaching system that is delivering tangible benefit back into the organisation. Really difficult to achieve. A lot of organisations are delivering internal coaching systems, but it needs to be really efficient and functioning really well. Okay, moving into the senior managers. Remember from the last slide, this is the senior team. How do we get them to know what coaching is? Well, we've got in here use external coaches. I do say at this point, I would say that because we provide external coaching and it sounds like a really cheap sales tool. Actually, if you look at some of the other coaching culture models out there, like Peter Hawkins' 7-step coaching model, he also recommends the use of external coaches in this space. Of course, you could provide workshops to the senior team. There are other ways you could get them to know coaching. It's my belief external coaches is the best way to do that, but there are other ways of doing it. But this is a great space in which to train the senior team up into understanding what coaching is, get them into a one-to-one coaching space, and they go, I see the benefit in this. They then start doing it to their managers, and so on. We create this self-sustaining coaching culture. How do we get the senior team to do coaching? Well, they become ambassadors. So they start broadcasting the benefits of coaching to the rest of the organisation. You need at least 2 organisational coaching ambassadors if you want to start. If you've only got 1, you've got a problem. More than 2, brilliant. It doesn't actually matter if that senior executive doesn't have a clue what coaching is. As long as they're saying good words about it, that's a good start. They can find out later what it's all about, but you need your ambassadors to come and support it at senior level, or it's going to lose its initiative. And then finally, how do we get the senior managers to be coaching? Well, that's when we get a self-sustaining coaching culture, one where they understand the benefits, they talk the language of coaching, they are coaching with their people, and so therefore it becomes self-sustaining. It starts generating itself and going round and round, and the culture is then fully embedded. So what we've got in front of you now is the Embark Coaching Culture tool. The 9 dimensions are essential to developing a coaching culture. Without them, you won't develop a coaching culture. So with this knowledge, having created this tool, we were like, well, what can we do with it next? And the obvious thing to do was then to turn it into an assessment tool. And we created the Coaching Culture Embark Diagnostic. It's a 27-question diagnostic of 1 to 10 answers. So where 1 is bad, 10 is good. There are 3 questions per dimension, and the questions relate to the organisational coaching culture. It produces, through some clever wizardry that I don't fully understand because I've got guys that do that, these numbers. What I do know is I know they work, and I know that it functions well. But just before we go into this, because this is the first case study, I'm going to explain to you what the numbers, how the numbers work and how the colours work. So we've got a red, amber, green rag system here. Once I've done that, I'm going to ask you and Nitin to come back in, and based on what I've told you, try and define what's wrong with the culture of this organisation. Because this is a live company. I'll tell you who it is at the end. I'm going to tell you now in case you know them, people who work there, and then you might have it's a global company, but you might make some assumptions which would colour it. So the percentage scores in the system are how far the organisation is down that dimension to being perfect, perfect being 100%. We never expect an organisation to get 100%. They'll get very close, but we never expect them to get there. So we can see, for instance, that the workforce knowing, the top left dimension there, 56.61%, that's good progress. They're about 60% of the way there. So that's a good sign. So we can look through the percentages and see roughly where we are when we progress through. The red, amber, green system essentially takes the lowest percentage and the highest percentage and splits them by 3 and colours them. Now the reason we do that is if all your numbers were 90%, you would still have at least 1 green, 1 red and 1 amber. The purpose of that being that these are the areas where you need to focus. So the red ones are the areas for immediate development. The amber ones you can leave for a bit. The green ones you're doing well on. So whatever your results are, whether they're all at 15% or they're all at 90%, there's always places where we can improve and where we need to develop. Then finally, to support our organisations, they get an overall coaching culture score. This company has 40.33%. Actually, do you know what? That's not far off the international average for organisations. It's about 45% for organisations, which tells us how far a journey we've got with coaching cultures overall. If they're over 60%, they tend to be lying to themselves. But I wouldn't tell an organisation that, but that's my first thought when I read 60% is you're lying, you don't know, and we go back and we find out. So based on that explanation, I'm hoping that you can come back to me now and say, this international global company, this is its coaching culture on one page. What's its problem?
Thanks, Tim. I think from what I see, the problem seems to be that the top organization, top leaders, while using coaching, they probably are not doing so much of coaching.
Yep.
And middle management does not believe itself in a coaching. So, very limited set of people who actually knows coaching or doing coaching. And while we see that there is a workforce who is getting benefited from coaching, but they don't intend to be coach. They don't intend to become a coach from a coach. Yeah, I think that's what I see here from the red, amber, green. That's what I could see. So people want to take a benefit of coaching, but they are somehow apprehensive about becoming a coach, or they don't know if they can actually become a coach. There is a probably apprehension of their ability as well. If I can become a coach, if I can do what a coach does, that's what I would see from these colors.
Right. So what excites me more than anything else is, Nitin, you've seen this and you've diagnosed an organizational coaching culture without knowing your organization, and without knowing anything about them. You've given me a minute's, if you like, explanation of what the problem is. And if we went further, you would be able to say, I know what I'm going to do here in this organization. I know where I'm going to start. And the obvious place to start is build coaching skills, because we need to start helping the junior managers know what coaching is. Now, in this map, so we call it a map because you can take journeys on it. In this map, what I call this central thing, the red belt of doom. And what it essentially means is we have a workforce that's very coaching open. They know about it, they're doing it, and they're working well together. We have a senior team who's clearly receiving senior executive coaching and has an understanding of what it is, and they believe they're being ambassadors for it. We've used the term advocates there, but ambassadors is fine. However, as you say, Nitin, why is it not translating down to the middle management? Now, interestingly enough, if I explain to you that the company is Bacardi Worldwide and that much of the senior managers are based in one place and that the middle managers run all of their global, if you like, business units, they're the ones taking all the flak. And they don't see the senior managers enough to get the coaching culture come through. All they see is do the job, do the job, do the job. Now, the people, the workforce, they work for Bacardi. They're as happy as Larry. They're loving it. This is a great brand to be working for. We're all having a wonderful time. And I go down with my mates. What do you do? I work for Bacardi. Oh, that's cool, right? So they've got that coaching culture going on. And so actually the structure of the organization is what's holding back their coaching culture. And in this case, an initiative to train up in-country managers and their teams in what a coaching culture is would be the first step for developing this organization's coaching culture. So hopefully that makes sense. I've got another one for you, so we can have another, because I did say you did ask for case studies. But before I do give you the other one, I just wanted to talk to you about one final thing that we do with these Embark diagnostic maps. The overall percentage at the top in the purple box can vary obviously from 0 to 100%. And what we've done in our research is, I don't know, you may or may not know, but I talked about David Clutterbuck earlier, who's well known in the UK for his, globally he's well known for his coaching work. Him and Megginson, Clutterbuck and Megginson, did 4 levels of a coaching culture activity tool a few years back. And what I've done is I've taken those 4 levels and plugged them into the scoring system of our coaching culture. And this is what I've come out with. And I'm really pleased because what we've done is this model, we've used all the existing coaching culture work that's taken place and tried to draw it all into one place. That way, the value of other people's work is brought in. So I've taken Clutterbuck and Megginson's 4 levels, and I've said basically that if you get less than 38% in your overall coaching score, your coaching culture is what David Clutterbuck and Megginson say is nascent, which means coaching may happen, but it's haphazard and top managers are not role models. And these descriptions are great for the early phases of a coaching culture diagnostic, because you can say to somebody, look, you're currently nascent and you need to move to tactical. So tactical 38 to 50% roughly. The value of an establishing coaching culture is recognised, so we start to know what it is, but there is little understanding of what it means or what is involved. If we're over 50, so Bacardi worldwide, they were in the tactical phase. If we're over 50, we're strategic. People have the confidence to use coaching approaches in a wide range of situations. Coaches ask for coaching. Top management sets an example by coaching others. Now, what really excites me is the language that these two have used fits perfectly into the diagnostic. So this really fits very nicely in terms of understanding it. But, you know, what I'd like to get to a situation where I could say to 100 companies, I could define where their coaching culture is. We've got 6 tactical, 3 nascent, 4 strategic, and then finally, if there ever is an embedded coaching culture, never come across one yet, I would like to add. It could be you. You might know that company. Give me a ring if you do. Greater than 70%, where coaching is part of our everyday work. Upward feedback happens, so we coach and manage upwards as well as down. That meets my hierarchy of equals wording. People expect feedback and work on it through coaching, through the conversational language of coaching. So when I feed back initially to organisations, I will always say to them, you're nascent, tactical, strategic or embedded, and we need to move to a strategic. And to do that, we need to move up this number of percentages, and so therefore we need to do X, X and X. So this is a really important top level piece about drawing in other academic work. Okay, right, so to finish off, I'm going to give you a case study. This is another organisation, UK organisation. Now, you can see the results for yourself. You can see the RAG system on it. I would be interested to know, Nitin, what this tells us about this organisation. It's a little bit messier than the other one, I would accept that, but what immediately comes off the page?
These are very interesting numbers.
Go on. That's exactly the right answer, by the way.
To be very frank, I don't know. You know, it seems that 52% for senior management is coaching as well. So I think they're doing pretty well. They can improve from where they are. I think that's what I would say.
Do you know that?
They're ambers and greens, I would say they're doing pretty well and they can move further. There are always chances of improvement.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you could argue that the answer you've given is sort of quite open and vague, but actually you described exactly the situation of this coaching culture of this organisation. Does anybody else want to pitch in with any thoughts? Is there anyone, whether we can make that happen?
Anybody else wants to take a stab?
It's fair enough if you don't, but I'd be interested to hear if we can make the technology work.
Tim, I'm not able to relate the junior middle managers being 56.61 in doing, but they are in a higher state of being at 66.82. That doesn't look very consistent here.
Very good. Absolutely. So something's not right, isn't it? And I think that's what Nitin said, is they're doing well, but you know, and when he opened with it's an odd set of numbers, it absolutely is an odd set of numbers, and you might be forgiven for looking at this and going, well, the model's a load of rubbish. You know, they're all over the place. Actually, the model tells us the story perfectly as to what's going on in this organisation. Absolutely perfectly. So, was there anyone else before I go through this? Okay.
Maybe the assessment answers were not given correctly. Yeah, maybe that's the case.
Yes, we did question that, and that's not actually true. So the company is British Gas. So British Gas is the UK's largest provider of gas utilities to probably something like 20 million homes. Very big organisation. This team was their sales team. So it was telephone, outbound telephone and inbound telephone calls. There are 1,200 people in this organisation that took this test. We had 800 responses, and they were across 7 sites. Now, the team had been very, very keen on coaching. And the senior team had spent the last 2 years bringing in a coaching culture. they'd spent an absolute fortune taking their people through coach training. And in the questionnaire that we put out, there was coaching conversations happening weekly between managers and and their workers, which is unheard of. I mean, weekly formal coaching conversations between their managers. So they were sitting down. It was written in their diary, coaching with manager, and they'd sit down and do formal hours once a week with their manager. So these guys were really on it, hence the high numbers. They were really giving the coaching, doing well. And if you look, you can see workforce knowing is green because they're all doing coaching, good high number. And the same with the junior middle managers, that's green, 74%, because they're doing coaching and it's all going really, really well. There's a problem with the senior team, which interestingly enough, when I put this in front of the senior team, they all leant back and they all sighed and went, yes, right, because they all hadn't, although they've been through the training, they were not doing enough about coaching, and it showed clearly here. And this was coming from their colleagues as well. People work for them, so the message was quite clear. They didn't know much about coaching. But what's most interesting about it is because they were having regular meetings and they were doing coaching, had the coaching training. That's why, as MG said earlier, the being numbers were so high, because they thought, yeah, we're doing it, it's happening. We're meeting, we're all great. But when we did the breakdowns, and this is the real killer, when we did the breakdowns of each of these sections, so we provide averages, what we discovered was they were doing more than they knew. And so what turned out was the company was doing a lot of coaching, but they didn't know what coaching was. And as a result, they were not getting a coaching culture, which is why they called us in. And it was very clear to me, and interestingly enough, with this organisation, because they were so advanced in their coach training, we then went in and we did a really granular piece of work, very, very interesting, where we broke coaching down into 7 key aspects. And I probably can't remember all 7, but it was questioning, listening, feeding back, emotions, thoughts and emotions, structure, so how the coaching sessions were structured. It was things like that. And then we went out and measured each of those 7 to find out what part of the coaching did they not know. And what we discovered was there were weaknesses in their listening specifically. And that was why they were doing coaching, but they weren't listening like coaches. And so coaching wasn't happening. And they thought they were being, but they weren't. They were just doing a lot of doing. Maybe they were doing MG's doing, which is the push hard. Come on, we're going to do it through the discomfort zone out the other side. But what the great thing about what that was, the organisation went back, and with that granular detail, they were able to refine the key parts of where their coaching was failing. They actually went through an exercise of observing coaching and using the 7 key aspects of coaching. They were able to look once again at where they were strong and where they were weak, as well as doing the assessment. So for them, it was there was lots of sighing and tutting because they'd spent so much money in this coaching initiative, but they delivered the wrong result. And the great thing about the tool was it was able to tell them very clearly that they were doing more than they knew.
This is very interesting, Tim, what you're bringing out. Is this the last slide, Tim?
Yes, yeah, I can stop there if you want. There was going to be some stuff about how wonderful it all is and a clever close off, but it doesn't need it.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting. I think, and this tool that you've created can really give a lot of insight into what's going on, as you said. So there's some questions that are coming in, and I know it's the top of the hour, and we are already 10 minutes over. So if there are people who would like to ask questions, please feel free. Tim, would you have some more time to stay on?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Mukesh, can you take the questions? I actually need to run off and catch the flight in some time.
Okay.
So some of the questions.
Nitin, can I just say, if anyone does want to go, my email address is there. They're more than welcome to send to me, and I will send you a copy of the slides. Okay.
That would be fantastic, Tim. Thanks a lot, for coming in. I think it's a very great tool that you've developed for the diagnostics of coaching culture.
Well, yes, thank you. I mean, I've introduced it to a number of very clever people and some big luminaries in the world coaching environment, and they've all been impressed and said good things. So I know it. What I do know is I know it works, and I know it's great, and I know that it helps companies understand their coaching culture. And that's really, for me, that's all I need to know.
Fantastic. So Mukesh, can you please take the questions?
Yeah, sure. I'll just go through the. Actually, what I can do is whoever wants to ask, they can unmute themselves and ask the question directly.
That would be great.
Yeah, Sunil, would you like to ask that question?
Yeah, I will go ahead. Am I loud and clear?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hi, Tim. Thanks for such an enlightened, webinar on coaching culture and how to really measure it. When I look at the 9-box framework that you are talking about, obviously all are important as we have seen. Is there any particular sequence or recommendation as to if we have to initiate a coaching culture in an organization, how do we go about it?
That's a really good question. Thank you. And that actually answers my question of is it this is a map. Okay, so what you're looking at is a map. Now, let's see if I can draw my pencil out here, if you can see it. But there are various journeys you can take on this map. And you would, as an organization, it would be a mistake to try and take on all 9 dimensions at the same time. So you need to be strategic about how you do it. So most organizations in today's world take this following journey here. So they start off with senior managers doing executive coaching. I'm sorry it's red. Can I change it? Oh, I can. How exciting. So most companies start with external coaches. And if you imagine 20 years ago, a lot of companies were using external coaches. They then went through the process of building coaching skills. They then built their internal coach pool, and then they delivered their internal coach pool and supervised it and supported it. Now, the problem with that is, of course, that we didn't take into account this. We were doing it, and often we missed these bits out as well. And so as a result, the organisation didn't get the coaching. Having said that, there are other journeys that people can take. So, for instance, this organisation, from my point of view, based on the fact that we know that they are doing more than they're knowing, I would take the following journey. I would have gone up like that, and then I would go across to there with this company. So I would start here at the senior team, and I'd do a lot more granular training with them, get them really embedded into it, so that then they can move to here. Although they're already there, I think they could be better there. Then we do some targeted coaching skills, work on the workforce, and only then would we move across into the theory phase. So a long answer to your question, but essentially there are many journeys that you can take on the map, and it will all depend on the results. Does that help, Sunil?
Yes, makes sense. I think, yeah, it all depends also the results that we are achieving in each box and where the focus has to be at any moment of time.
Yes, and also remember that these dimensions change. So I can think of some companies that we've done where you do it 6 months later and it's radically changed. And sometimes it can be difficult to identify why. But they do change, yes. So it's a dynamic tool. You need to keep working with it.
Sure. Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was useful.
Manikantan, would you like to ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Can you be louder?
Okay, let's see. How about now?
You are good.
Okay, so my quick question is, in the British gas case, they called you you in because did they detect a business failure that required them to do the assessment?
It's a good question. So British Gas is actually a financial institution because they provide insurance rather than utilities. It's a strange thing, but that's the business model they operate. As a result, they're regulated by the UK financial authorities. And at the time, the UK financial authorities were getting slammed by the clients. So we're talking about banks and things like that for poor customer service. And this organisation decided they were going to tackle their customer service by doing a coaching culture. And they had realised that their customer service results were not increasing as a result of the coaching culture as fast as they had expected, which made them question what's going on. Because they knew a coaching culture would deliver better customer satisfaction results, but they weren't getting them. So it was as a result of customer satisfaction that caused them to call us in.
Got it. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. It is actually about, just about another 4 minutes to 9 here in India. We are already 26 minutes over time. Perhaps we can take the last question. Suresh, would you like to ask your question? Okay, I think Suresh may not be there.
No.
Anyone? Hello? Anyone else who has a question to ask?
I think that's it. We've done it.
That's it.
We've
That's
worn them
it.
out.
Yeah, team, thank you so much. A lot of people have sent their wishes to you. They're extremely happy with this session. I think we learned a very good model. So if anybody has any questions, can they reach out to you at any email ID or something like that?
Yes, I did have it on the, hang on, I have to turn this off. And can I, yeah, I'll leave that on there, and then somebody wants to contact me, my email address is there. They're more than welcome to drop me a line. I will, of course, send the slides to you guys, and if you wish to send them out to everyone, then please do. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, team. On behalf of ICF Bengaluru Chapter, we'd really like to thank you for such a wonderful session. Lovely. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye all. Take care. Bye-bye.